Hey, how's it going, everybody? I finally got a frickin' day off, so I'm gonna get around to my pesky axle seal that I've been meaning to replace. Here they are. This is the inside and outside axle seal, and this is the gasket that goes on the actual cover itself, which I'll also be replacing just for good measure. But first, I have to go get myself a 34 millimeter axle or castle nut. Excuse me, a 34 millimeter socket. There we go. To remove the castle nut, which is right here, because apparently I have a 36 and it's just a little too big. So I gotta go get myself a 34 if I can find one. Hopefully I can. We'll see. But I'm gonna hit the road and go find myself a socket first. I guess I need my wallet. Should probably keep that on me. That's not good. The largest they have is a 30 millimeter. Nah, man, look at that sexy bike. It's a little dirty. It's all good. Anyway, so that was very unsuccessful. I'll go ahead and stop by. I'm going to go ahead and stop by the mini shop that I go to. They know me pretty well there, see if they got one I can borrow. Didn't think it was going to be this difficult. But apparently it is. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, Roadkill. But it's the drag wire. No, just me? Alright. Matchbox Mini here. And the awesome blue pickup. You see, now, just let me borrow their socket. I'm gonna take it home with me. It's really nice, guys. I'll bring it back, of course, as soon as possible. Shouldn't take too long, hopefully. Provided nothing's too seized on. The Matchbox Mini. Alright, let's go take care of this. There she is. Mini of Doom. Alright. So today, once again, what I'm planning on doing is replacing the axle seal on the passenger side of my Mini. As you can see, the caliper is already in the ground. That's because I've attempted to do this once, but I ended up not having the right size axle nut. So I'm just going to do the walkthrough the same as if I didn't try it before. And I'm just not going to post the previous video where I realized, oh crap, I don't have the right size axle nut, or socket for the axle nut. So, or castle nut. So the first thing I'm going to do is break that axle nut. I just pop the center cap off the wheel here. Make sure the vehicle or the car or whatever you're doing is on the ground, and make sure you have the right size socket for that. In my case, it's a 1 5/16 or a 34 millimeter, but hopefully this will break relatively easily, especially since I'm going to use my little mini torch here and heat the axle nut up, or the castle nut. Alright, so I had to break out the big boy, which was my piece of fence pole that I found on the side of the road. And I had to stick it on my wrench here to actually break that bolt, the axle nut, or the castle nut. It was on there pretty tight, but it's off now. So I'm going to go ahead and jack the car up, take the wheel off, and then we'll go on from there. Alright, so real quick, a couple things I want to mention. Some of the tools that you're going to be needing is a jack stand, of course, for safety. A pair of needle nose pliers, and that's going to be to get out the locking pin for the castle nut, which I've already done here. Crowbar for anything that may be seized on there pretty well. A ball joint breaker. A hammer, of course, if you're going to use one. And then, okay, these right here are for the brake caliper. And I believe that's a 9/16. That's a 9/16. Alright, so once you got the castle nut loose, you're going to go ahead and take your tire back off. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is you want to disconnect your shock absorber. That's a 9/16 nut here. Just take it off. There's going to be a washer at the end. You can just go ahead and pull it off. Alright, then your next step is going to be taking off the upper and lower control arms, which are an 11/16. There it is. Alright, go ahead and take the washers off of that too, because we're going to go and pop these off here. Alright, then we have the steering arm. It's also an 11/16. Just a little bit different of a nut, but it's a locking nut as opposed to just a standard. Alright, and then once you have all the nuts off, oh, almost forgot the brake caliper. Alright, so your brake caliper has two 9/16 bolts. They're going to be right behind the brake caliper. I already have my brake caliper setting up over here. So you go ahead and take off both of these. They're on the back side just like this. Take them out, and then it comes right off of the, ow, there's something sharp back there. Alright, and it comes right off of the dust cover. For the castle nut, I had to heat it up with the torch to get it off. If you don't have a torch, I recommend you just go buy one. They're like 10 bucks, 11 bucks. You don't have to get anything special. You can just get a little handheld one just like this. And like I said, it's real cheap, and it just fills up with a standard butane or natural gas aerosol can. Alright, so once you get your castle nut off, you can just go and pull up on the rotor a little bit, and it's going to pull this washer out. Alright, so there's your washer. Now with that off, you can just go ahead and pull off the rotor. Also take off your dust cover just to make it a little easier access for you. Alright, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to break or take off either the top or the lower, and that should give us a little more extra room to play with. Realistically, you should do both and take off the steering arm as well. That'll give you all the room that you need to take this, the actual hub itself off. Now, I've said previously that these can be seized on there really well, which they can. So WD-40, best friend. And then additionally, your little handheld torch. It's going to come in handy again to heat up just around the control arm where the bolt goes through it. That'll expand it a little bit and hopefully make it a little easier to get off. Just heated it up, used my ball joint separator, got that out. Went ahead and pushed the hub assembly aside. I didn't even have to take off the steering rod there. And then I just pulled the axle. Now, before I pull the axle out, I want to make sure I get a drip pan under there. But as soon as I pull that axle out, a bunch of fluid's going to come out. In my case, it's going to be motor oil because my transmission and engine use the same oil. So I'm going to go ahead and get an oil pan under there, so when I pull it out, all the oil goes into the oil pan instead of all over the driveway. Now the reason I didn't drain the oil, you should drain the oil first, but the reason I didn't is because I'm having a little bit of an issue with my oil drain plug. It's stripped. That's my oil drain plug there. And when I bought the car, it was stripped. So every time I've been changing the oil, I've just been loosening up the rear diff bolts and letting the oil drain out that way. But I'm going to go ahead and get a helicoil and fix that issue. Alright, so there's my axle. Basically, it's pretty simple. You just need to get something, sometimes you can actually just pull them straight out, but sometimes you might need to get something to get in between here and the rear diff case, and just stick it in there and then pry it out, and you should be able to pull it out from there. Mine came out fairly easy. I did have to use the crowbar to get in here, like I said, and just use it to pry it out. But from now, I got the oil, it's draining right now. But from this point, I'm just going to go ahead and use my ratchet. I believe they're 9/16 bolts. I'll verify that in just a minute. And you're going to remove the rear diff case. Well, I am. I'm going to go ahead and remove the rear diff case so I can get to both of the axle seals as well as the new case gasket. Alright, so those bolts were 7/16. There was 4 of them, and this is the cover that I'm replacing the gasket on. The seal goes right here inside of there. If you're just replacing the seal, you don't actually have to take the cover off, but I'm replacing both because I'm already there, so I might as well do it. And additionally, I don't know if the leak was actually coming from this seal here or the actual gasket, due to the fact that the entire thing was covered in oil. So I couldn't accurately determine where the leak was coming from, so not a big deal. Replacing outer O-ring seal and then the gasket. The only thing I really have to say, if you're doing it on the passenger side, the driver's side is more accessible. If you're doing it on the passenger side, you're going to have to worry about the exhaust getting in the way, and I just simply loosened up all the exhaust couplings on the bottom where it attaches to the hangers. Let's see if I can show you those real quick. So I just loosened up right here on the exhaust hangers, and used my foot, pushed back on the exhaust to get the last bolt off. Alright, when you're setting your new seal in place, you're going to make sure that the the spring on the inside is facing down towards the inside, towards the engine, or towards the internals, and the outer lip that's kind of raised is going to be outward, just like this. Go ahead and use some old oil, new oil, it doesn't really matter, just to get it in there. And then you're going to use a socket, or if you have a actual O-ring driver, go ahead and use that. But I'm just going to use a socket that fits right along the edge, and then lightly tap it into place. That way it gets nice and even in there. You don't want to use a screwdriver. If you use a screwdriver, you can end up damaging the rubber, and then you're still going to have the leak. Alright, so I have my piece here. Go ahead and line up my socket right over it. Grab my hammer. Alright, now for this portion I have a paper gasket here. I'm going to use some gasket sealant. I always use gasket sealant, just because I don't trust these little paper gaskets. It does have a little bit of a, I don't know, I guess a sealant on there, but not on this side. I don't know why it's on one side and not the other. But yeah, so I'm going to use a little bit of that. But if you do use gasket sealant, just ensure that you don't cover up these holes here. What these little grooves are here is for the lubrication for the oil to get into the axle itself to lubricate it, and so it doesn't burn out your bearings. Before you stick the gasket on there, what you want to do is take a razor blade or something like that, go around the entire edge to make sure it's nice and smooth. You can even use some really fine sandpaper just to clean up the edges as well. You don't want to leave any of the old gasket on there or the old sealant, because it'll create a gap inside your gasket and you'll still have your leaking problem. Alright everybody, I didn't realize my camera died while I was doing the rebuild of everything after the axle seal, so I really apologize for that. I did get through just about everything I wanted to cover as far as the disassembly and the important mentionables like the gasket and the O-ring and things like that. But the reassembly is just the same in the opposite direction. There's no real special tips, tricks, or anything like that, because it's a fairly straightforward job. The only thing I want to cover is in your axle, you might as well just go ahead and pop, when you pull your axle off, no matter what type of vehicle you have, it's front-wheel drive, you're going to have your driveline axle, and there's going to be a boot on there with, it just should be just filled with grease. Go ahead and pop that boot off, fill it with new grease, get rid of as much of the old grease as possible, and go ahead and put the boot back on, securing it with zip ties, or some of them have clamps or whatever they're using to do that with. Sorry, I'm out of breath. It is really hot, and I was riding my bike and the battery just died, so I had to run and jump start it. So that's why I'm out of breath. Anyway, so like I said, I don't really have anything specific to mention. Just make sure that you double check your work once you put everything back together. Make sure you don't have any extra bolts, obviously, and just do a quick overview to make sure you got everything. My wife got me a birthday present, and they're these John Cooper door trim. Basically, it just replaces the old wooden ones that are all cracked, and the plastic. I don't know if you can see this very well. You can see it over there. The plastic window manual doohickey handle, sure, and the door release itself. And also, there's a lock where that plastic lock is. Got a new metal one also. Now I'll have John Cooper's signature on them, which is really cool. So, my wife is awesome. If you have any questions about the project, the axle, or anything like that, or even not the axle, if you have any questions at all, let me know, and I can see if I can help you out. If I don't, I know a lot of people that are pretty mechanically inclined, and we can probably get together and figure it out for you. Pretty quickly too. All I have to do is pick up the phone, throw a text message, or call somebody, and I can probably figure it out for you. But there's not really too much you have to pay a mechanic for unless you have one of those new cars and there's something wrong with the computer, as I don't mess with that. That's not my style. There's probably somebody here watching that does mess with electronic components in newer vehicles. If so, if you see a comment and I tell them I don't know, please definitely help them out, so we can just be more of a community type thing.